present you our result from our discussion with Maastricht University.
In this video, we will discuss about gender inequality. According to BPS, gender inequality is an unfair condition due to the system and social structure, so that women and men become victims of the system. It exists in many sectors of life, such as education, politics, and many more. We choose this topic because we see that it has not been solved until now, and is still one of the world's problems. In Indonesia and Europe, the condition of gender inequality in education has improved significantly, but in work and economic and politics, the improvement is not that much. Because of that reason, we choose to focus on wage gap problem in gender inequality. According to gender equality in Ireland, wage gap is the difference between average gross earnings of female and male employees.
In this slide, we are going to show you comparison of wage gap problem between Indonesia and Europe. If we see this problem generally in Europe, women's gross hourly earnings were 60.2% below those of men in the Europe, while in Indonesia, the difference in salaries of male and female workers in Indonesia is low, namely 5.3%. If we see the wage gap from the same position between men and women in Europe, for example, at the director level, income inequality fell to 5.3%, while in Indonesia, the salaries of men and women in one position compared to the imbalance of negative 1.7%. If we see the wage gap from same company between men and women in Europe, the gap is lower at around 1.5%, while in Indonesia, the difference was negative at 1.2%. And if we see the wage gap from same position and same company in Europe, the wage gap is around 0.5%, and in Indonesia, the difference with men is even less, namely negative 4.1%. Due to Kerja.com, it can be seen that women who have higher salaries than men are only in the fields of apparel, textile, and fashion. In other fields, wage gap looks bigger in women.
The next one is cultural differences in gender inequality. This data we get from our interview with our parents. From the table, we can see that gender inequality in work environment in Europeans said men get many senior management posts, while in Indonesian, we have the same right and opportunities to get every level of job. Second, type of gender equality in work environment. In Europeans, first, men are often more confident in themselves at interviews. Second, men are less self-deprecating than women. While in Indonesian, salary depends on her or his productivity and skill in their job. Second, women are more valued as caretakers and considered unable to occupy a higher position. Third, differences in salary. In Europeans, there is no wage gap for the same job as the union are very strong on this. While in Indonesian, salaries depend on position in the workplace they occupy.
There are some possible reasons that can be used to explain why there is wage gap and why there is cultural difference in wage gap. Gender pay gap or wage gap is in most cases not actually means that men and women have difference in salary for the same job. The wage gap actually caused by the difference in work participation rate and their position in job. The difference in work participation rate and their position in job was actually caused by gender stereotype. It's still difficult to get rid of gender stereotyping and traditional view about women's role in Indonesia, in which the view about women are housewives that do the chores and take care of their children. This view caused many women choose not to get higher education and working after marriage. Gender stereotyping still also exists in Europe, but the traditional view does not have as much influence in Indonesia. Most women in Europe still working even though they are already married and have kids, and the case in which men take care of house and child start to appear. But still, most women still take care of house while working that make it harder for women. The influence of this view is very difficult to eliminate because usually this view is passed down through the family and has been introduced since childhood. So this view usually embedded as gender seem owned by children. Differences in pay gap between Indonesia or Western or Europe are not due to fundamental difference in cultural orientation, but to different gender equality movement. In Indonesia, feminism exists for 1 century but was massively held back by the New Order movement. Contemporary feminism only started to gain traction in the 90s again. This can explain why the traditional view in gender stereotyping still influencing women in many aspects of their life in Indonesia, especially in rural areas. One of the other causes of wage gap is negotiation. Negotiating a salary can make difference in earnings, and men are more likely than women to negotiate their salaries. According to a study, 42% of male participants and only 28% of women participant initiating negotiation. Most women just don't like to negotiate or unable to do so. Gender stereotypes in the workplace may affect women's effectiveness in salary negotiation. When women do negotiate and gender stereotype threat is activated, women do worse in negotiating and men do better because of their positive stereotype. Cultural difference also affect negotiation behavior of women, in which patrilineal culture women dislike bargaining, contrast to matrilineal culture where women tend to be more successful negotiators. This can explain why wage gap is higher in Europe, because in Europe they hold patrilineal culture belief, and on the other hand, Indonesia holds both culture, patrilineal and matrilineal. Do you feel that interacting with students halfway across the globe has helped you to look at psychology differently? For us, it should be able to help us a lot to look at psychology differently. But unfortunately, after we have finished this VM, we think that we did not get it as much as we hope, because there's a problem in communicating such as difference in time zones. What are pros and cons of having participated in this virtual mobility?
For us, the pros is improving communicating in English, experiencing teamwork with people from different culture. And the cons is due to slow response, the process takes too much time.
What would you do differently next time to improve teamwork?
To improve teamwork next time, we will deciding a clear deadline between both teams for every task that need to be done in performing phase. And second, be more communicative to everything that related to the task.
And here are the list of references that we use to make this output.
So this is the end of our video. Thank you for watching. Bye!